Hi, and thank you for joining me for another video where we will study the Bible and see the world through the eyes of Scripture. Um, I'm going to work on a video dealing with the biblical parallels between the Hebrews, the children of Israel, and between the Negroid people. And this is because it's a little in depth. It's going to require multiple videos. So you'll probably see a couple parts 1, 2, and maybe 3. I don't know um, how many videos I'm going to ultimately make, but I will be making several videos. But anyway, before we get into studying this, I just kind of needed to express something. See, when I started doing this channel, I just started because I was really tired of going to your typical American so-called church. If anyone has watched any of my videos, you know that I don't call them churches because they're not. They operate under false pretenses. I call them 501c3 institutions. It's just a name I kind of call them. And the reason I stopped listening and going to those institutions is because they were not teaching the gospel and I wasn't learning anything. So I just separated myself and started just studying my scripture from Genesis to Revelations. And the Lord, God, He really does keep His word when He says that, if you seek, you will find. If you knock, the door shall be open. If you ask, you shall receive. And so that's where I was with His word. And in that process, He has given me so much revelation, more revelation than I could have ever gotten sitting under false teachers. But He's given me so much revelation and over things that I just was not expecting. Yeah, I was not expecting to find out who the children of Israel were. I didn't even know there was something to discover. Um, and then He's also given me revelation on Mystery Babylon and about things that are coming in the future. And so I want to share those things with you. And we will be looking at scripture because this is not something that I'm making up. It will be in the Bible as we discuss it. But before I can even get into other topics down the line, such as Mystery Babylon and the end times and things like that, we have to get a deeper and better understanding about the children of Israel. And so even with that, as I believe I mentioned, there's going to be about several videos that I have to do. So it'll be multiple part videos because we're going to take a really close look. And it's like part of the reason why I'm doing this is because it amazes me how all this time we as Hebrews have been reading that word in that Bible and not knowing the whole time it was us that the Lord was talking to. And of course, how could we know? Because God did allow most of Israel to be blinded. But either way, what I've discovered in unraveling who the children of Israel are is that you're going to run into a lot of people, especially if they're not Hebrew. You will run into a lot of people who will not be happy at your revelation and your discovery. And it's I can't even find the right words to say it. But I'm just going to say that, yeah, you're going to find a lot of people who are not happy to find out who you are. And you'll also find that more people knew who you were than you realized. There was a reason that we, as a Negro people, were not allowed to read. Why we could be killed if we learned to read, especially during a time when the Bible was read, the most read book in the world. And it still is, but especially during that time where they lived and preached and taught the slaves from the Bible, but yet the slaves were not allowed to read the Bible. I understand now why so many things happen to our people. It just all makes sense. And the more I study, there's so much information about the children of Israel. And even doing multiple videos, I do not have the ability to cover everything. But I am going to try to go over a good portion of the information so that we can really get a closer look at who the children of Israel are. So I really hope you journey with me as we study about the children of Israel, part 1. So the first parallel that I want to examine is going to be the hair. So with the children of Israel, what we're going to first find is that Jesus, and as I mentioned, I am learning about who we are, so I'm slowly starting to use the Hebrew name for Jesus, Yahshua, and Yahweh. But if I interchange between Jesus and God, forgive me. Again, I'm growing and this is still new to me. But when we see Yehoshua and Yahweh, or Jesus and God the Father, they both have woolly hair. That's something that I find very interesting. So what you want to do is, if you look at Daniel chapter 7 verse 9, you'll see it says, behold, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. Now, just in this verse alone, what we see is the Ancient of Days. The Ancient of Days is Yahweh. It's God the Father. And we see that his hair is a pure wool. That's interesting. Then we have Revelations chapter 1 verse 13. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a fire of flame. And again, that's Revelation chapter 1, verses 13 through 14. So here, again, we see hair like wool. Now, this one I've noticed is argued by people who refuse to accept the fact that Jesus, Yehoshua, is a Negroid man. Because they say that, they look at the part where it says white, and they stop right there. They cut it off, and they just say, well, it doesn't mean he has woolly hair. It's just telling you about the color. No, actually, it's telling you two things. It's telling you both the color and the texture. Now and again, as I mentioned, there are people who know who we are, and they don't like us unraveling and discovering who we are. Although, at the same time, they still like to make movies. And as I mentioned and pointed out in my video about They Know Who You Are, Do You Know Who You Are? And I'll include the link in the description box if you want to view that. But as I pointed out in that video, even though they don't want to acknowledge who you are, they will always make hints at your identity about who you are, as I will point out in this next clip.
Oh, this is just wool. You say I got wool on my head, not hair. Sing it for me, Mina.
God's wool, not hair.
It's just wool, and it ain't even yours, ever, if I say it ain't. Okay. Yeah. See, we got wool, man. We got wool. You move your head, Mina, I'm gonna bleed your skull. You like the way I touch you, Mina? You like the way I touch you?
And as you can see from that video, as I pointed out, they love to hint at your identity, especially in slave movies or movies that are saturated with black people during older time frames. You don't see it too much in more modern movies, but definitely in a lot of older movies or slave movies with black people. And as you can see also, there's I think a museum with racist memorabilia or things like that where, at one point it was okay and legal to be racist. And a lot of advertising marketing was done in the name of black people. And ironically, though, you'll find a lot of racist paraphernalia still out there, but it's very limited with them referencing wool. So this is the only one that I could find with wool. Nonetheless, it still shows my first point of the parallels between Jesus, who was a Hebrew, and a Negro people, and the two of them both have woolly hair. So Jesus, being a Hebrew, being Jewish more specifically, that gives you a parallel already to see what the Hebrew people look like and that those people still exist today. Next, let's take a look at the tribe of Dan. From the tribe of Dan, we have Samson. Now, Samson I found to be very interesting because, again, as like I pointed out, we were sitting here reading this Bible, not knowing the people in the Bible were people like you and I who look like us, because we were taught that we were Gentiles, and God loved us and welcomed us, but actually we are the Hebrews. And case in point is Samson. So the thing with Samson, everybody knows that Samson had long hair, and with the vow of Nazarite, he was not allowed to cut his hair. And by not cutting his hair, he was able to maintain the strength that God had given him. And the strength, you just want to read about it. It's just awesome, the things that he's done. And again, the key to his strength was his hair. So if his hair was cut, then what would happen is he would lose his strength. Now, as going through and journeying through the scripture, once I realized that he had 7 locks, then my thought process started to think like maybe he had dreadlocks, simply because we're thinking, oh, well, dreadlocks, he must not have, I don't know. We think that just because he couldn't cut his hair, we presume that his hair was locked. But just because he didn't cut his hair did not mean that he couldn't manipulate his hair into other styles besides locks. Plus, when I thought about what locks look like, manicured dreadlocks, you usually have about 100 locks in a person's head or more. And if you look at freeform locks, and for those who are not familiar with freeform locks, that's when you allow the hair to naturally grow out in its natural state. And without manipulating it, you allow it to lock on its own. Now, those locks are much bigger, but nonetheless, they still don't lock in the whole head and form 7 locks. I've yet to see one person with freeform locks that has only 7 locks in their hair. And then it dawned on me, his hair is braided. More specifically, it's cornrowed. Where am I coming up with this from? Well, one, keep in mind the scripture points out that he has 7 locks. 7. And then, I looked further into these 7 locks. And what I discovered when I look up the Hebrew definition, for example, when I looked up his hair, when it says locks, it says a plait of hair. That's interesting. A plait of hair. I know a people that wears their hair in plaits, or in other words, braids. And I kept looking into it. Another definition is a intertwining and passing through of each other. Of the strands. So your plaiting is when you're intertwining or passing through the strands from one to another, or again, braiding. And another definition says a ringlet of hair gliding over each other. again. So this is how I know his hair was not only not in dreadlocks, it was cornrowed. Samson had 7 cornrows in his hair. Moving on, the next parallel that I want to discuss concerning hair is the Israelite Solomon, who was Hebrew. More specifically, he was from the tribe of Judah, making him Jewish. Now, when we look at King Solomon, what I find interesting is it says that his head is as the most fine gold, his locks are bushy, and black as a raven. Now, when I look into the definition of bushy, it brings me to when I look at the Hebrew definition of bushy, what I find is it says locks of hair, and then it also makes the association of clusters of dates. Now, this one kind of had me scratching my head. It took me a while before the Lord gave me clear revelation on that. So I had to look up, okay, clusters of dates. So that basically means a group of similar things or people positioned or occurring closely together to be or become into a cluster. And that's the definition of cluster. So, you take that definition and mix it with dates. And then I looked up what a cluster of dates would look like. And this is what I come up with, this big old bush. Now, although I get it, I didn't quite get it. So I kept looking and kept doing research. And again, I went back to the Hebrew. And it links you to a root word, tel, which I believe I've said that correctly, the Hebrew word tel. That means heap, mound. So I'm like, okay, I see the words heap and I see the word mound. So let me look that up and take that Hebrew word and look it up in the English to see what it means. And when I did, this is kind of what led me to kind of understand. So a mound is a rounded mass projecting above a surface. A heap into a rounded pile. So I found this interesting because isn't that pretty much what an Afro looks like? It's a mound. It's a mound of hair piled or heaped onto a surface. That's what a rounded Afro looks like. So I'm like, okay, so when it's saying bushy, it's being very specific. And you also want to be careful about other translations. This is why I stick with the King James, because when you read other translations, they will manipulate that word into wavy. But if you read the King James, and they all link back to the same Hebrew text, it will bring you to the same thing. It will bring you to date clusters. And it's going to reference words like mound, heap, letting you know that basically it's a bush. It's a big bush that is just heaped into a pile. And that's pretty much a clear definition of what an afro is. It's a mound or a heap of hair. Okay, now this next one, I'm sure it's going to upset a lot of my sisters. But one, keep in mind, I'm just a messenger. I'm just reading what's in scripture. But two, take this as a sense of pride and ownership, because it again marks a distinction that makes us different from any other people and validates that we are the true children of Israel, no matter how much people try to deny us. Because see, just like when our Messiah, when Yahshua, it was prophesied. I believe there are over 300 prophecies about the Messiah. But they were so specific that it was impossible for anyone to have fulfilled those prophecies but the one whom it was prophesied of, which was the Messiah. And it's the same parallel as well with the children of Israel. There are a ton of prophecies and specific details and parallels concerning the children of Israel. So specific that only one people can fulfill that, and that would be the true children of Israel. And so one of the parallels you will find is the baldness in the women and the daughters of Zion. And you can find information about that in Isaiah chapter 3, verse 24, and Isaiah chapter 3, verses 16 through 17. How the Lord will smite them. And so, the beauty of this is the fact, again, this validates who we are in our Messiah. See, the hair industry, the last I checked, was over a $9 billion industry just on black women alone in hair care. Because in our community, it's no secret that our hairs, for men and women, it's distinctive. But for women, especially having that type, 4B, 4C hair, it definitely requires a lot of tender loving care. And look at the revolution or the evolution of our hair in the last, I'd say, 10 years, where now a lot of us are embracing the hair that the Lord has given us. But even prior to embracing our hair, if we look at our other sisters and brothers, our other Israelite sisters and brothers around the world, especially concentrated in the continent of Africa, you do see a lot of women with bald heads. This is not to be excused or explained away or taken for granted. There is a reason for this. And you people can say what they want, but there is no other race of women in the world that are known for having bald heads. And they're just not. Yes, you have anybody in any race that can go ahead and shave their head. But culturally, we are such a distinct people that our hair is a distinctive marker of who we are. And even the daughters of Zion, one of the curses that befell them because of their behavior, because of their outstretched neck, as the Bible said, they were smitten by the Lord with baldness. So when we see the curses that are played out in the children of Israel, that lets us know that it is us. We are his people. We are the children of Israel. So this is just going to be part 1, and this is just concerning the hair of the children of Israel. We have plenty other videos that we have to go through and go over. Again, this is just the beginning. But before I go, I did have one last thought that I kind of wanted to address. Just reflecting, especially on the fact that in the beginning we pointed out about Yeshua and how he has Yehoshua. I'm going to work on that. But just looking at the fact that he has woolly hair, like the Negro, of course, has woolly hair. Again, that's a distinctive trait that no other race of people has but the Negro people. But we also look at the fact that he has a dark complexion. But that's going to be for another video. But I only brought that up because it makes me wonder. We know that Yahweh is the father of Yehoshua. God is the father of Jesus. So when Mary conceived or carried Jesus inside of her, we know that the conception was not by any man that walked the face of this earth. It was from Yahweh. But yet he ends up with woolly hair, which ironically Yahweh has woolly hair as well, and a dark complexion. But then it also makes you think, what does Mary look like? So that's just food for thought I wanted to leave you guys with. Thank you for joining me as we study the scripture and continue to watch more videos and share this and spread the word, because I believe that the Lord is waking up Israel. A lot of things are coming our way, especially under this new presidency. There's a lot coming our way. And don't forget, we are also in the last days told about the time of Jacob's trouble, which is going to have to be another Bible study, which takes more time for me to study and get more understanding, revelation in the Word. So I'm not 100% on the time of Jacob's trouble, but I know enough to know that it is a specific tribulation targeted at the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But remember, Yahweh is coming back. Yehoshua is coming back. And he's going to gather his children from the four corners of the earth. This is how we know that when you see those false people over there in the Middle East claiming to be us, never forget Revelation chapter 2, verse 9, and Revelation chapter 3, verse 9, where they point out that they are liars, they are the synagogue of Satan. And God knows those who claim to be Jews, but they are not. Because the regathering never happened in 1948. That was through the United Nations. Yahshua will be coming back to regather the children of Israel and any Gentile that is grafted in among the children of Israel. So that's why it's important to know who we are, to know what is going on. I thank you so much for your time. Be blessed.